Hey guys, welcome back to Fix It Friday. So this week we are back with another modding video, and we're going to be talking today about the 3DO. This is a console that was released in the mid-90s, and it's a CD-based console, and people tend to lump it in with things like the Atari Jaguar or the CDI, basically as a failed console. But I honestly don't think that's a fair comparison. I mean, the 3DO is really cool. It's something I didn't enjoy in the 90s, but I discovered much later, and it has a pretty solid library of games. So today what we're going to be doing is installing the latest version of the RetroGem. So this is a board developed by PixelFX, and it's installable in a variety of different consoles, including the Sega Dreamcast, the PlayStation, the PS2, and now the 3DO, and I think many more are planned as well. So it's this kind of Swiss Army knife that you can install into a wide range of consoles and get direct HDMI out to your display. So yeah, I'm really excited for this. I've been waiting for it for a long time, and today we're going to install it in this console. So let's get started. All right, so before I get started, I just want to express how really happy I am that this HDMI mod is now available for the 3DO. Because kind of as of right now, there really aren't any video upgrades currently available for the 3DO at all. There used to be something called the 3DO RGB. It was also made by Dan Koons, who's part of the PixelFX team. But unfortunately, those are no longer being made by anybody. But that was a really nice analog RGB upgrade that also gave you a switch that let you toggle between 480i and 240p, which looks much sharper. So yeah, that used to be a thing, but it's no longer available. And like maybe 2 or so years ago, there was a guy who goes by the name of Fixel who was claiming to have an HDMI mod for the 3DO, which seemed really exciting. I actually made the mistake of pre-ordering one, hoping that it would be something that would be released, but it turned into this big disaster with all sorts of, lies and excuses and nonsense, and finally the project getting, I think, postponed indefinitely. And on the positive side, I can say at least that I got my money back, but a lot of people are still waiting for their money back who made the mistake of buying stuff from Fixel. So yeah, I would say, I mean, I know he's working on new stuff now, but if you're thinking about buying stuff from him, just from my own experience, I would say avoid it like the plague, because you're pretty much guaranteed to be disappointed. So yeah, after all of that, losing the RGB mod, having a failed HDMI mod come out, it's really nice that now we finally have something that allows you to easily plug a 3DO directly via HDMI to your TV and give you very sharp video output. Okay, so let me get off my soapbox and get started here. So I've taken apart just the top shell here. You can see that this console has a optical disc emulator mod installed. This is by Memo, and yeah, it just allows you to play all of your games via USB. And there's a nice little adapter here that gives you an SD card reader on the side, so you have easy access to everything. So normally there, of course, would be a disk drive here, but that's not going to have any consequences as far as the mod is concerned. So taking apart a 3DO is actually very simple. You just have these little screws here, and they're actually very helpfully located, like, very clear to find all throughout the board. Just got to take those all off. Once that's all done, I'm just going to remove this really quickly. So yeah, once that's all done and the disk drive is removed, then the only other things you have to unplug is the fan. And this one has a fan mod installed. Quieter fan, there we go. And this is the transformer, which can stay right behind over here in the console. There's also these buttons here, and this like very large LED diffuser, which is right over here. There's like these two little tabs that you push on in order to set this free. So yeah, once all of that stuff is unplugged, oh no, yeah, and then there's also the controller daughter board here on the FZ1. So I'm gonna go ahead and just slot this guy out, and yeah, we're good to go. So let's have a look at the RF modulator, because the first thing we're gonna have to do is remove this part of the console. All right, so first order of business is we're going to be removing the RF modulator, because the HDMI port is going to go basically right here in place of it. Before I jump into that though, I also just want to remind people that if they're working on the 3DO and they haven't replaced the capacitors, I definitely recommend that, because like with the FZ1 in particular, these caps right here in the power supply section, They often fail, and these were already in a state of failure, so definitely a good idea to recap your 3DO before you really jump into doing any kind of mods. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to remove this RF modulator, and so to do that, we're going to use the desoldering gun, and we're also going to just start by adding some fresh solder and try to clear it all out. Okay, so that actually proved to be fairly tough to remove, and that's mainly just because the ground plane on the 3DO is pretty damn thick. So what I ended up doing was using my desoldering gun just to loosen up the three legs of the RF modulator right here. And then I usually just cut off the excess, and that's just to kind of minimize its ability to get stuck to things. And then rather than try to desolder these 3 points, I actually added more solder to them, and as I heated them up with the desoldering gun, I used my screwdriver kind of like as a fulcrum point. So I would just wedge this into the RF modulator and just kind of angle up, and that allowed me to slowly loosen it up and get it out. So it is kind of a pain to remove, just as a warning. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this HDMI adapter, and you can see I've put the adapter in, and it just slots into this little hole right here. And then there's a nut and screw that's supplied that you use to attach everything together. And so this is going to go right over here. And then on the bottom side, there is this brace, and that's going to go, underneath. And then everything is locked together with these screws and bolts. All that being said, these holes need to kind of be tapped. So what I'm doing now is, before I install anything, is just taking the screws and just kind of running them through the vias and threading the vias basically. And there we go, that one looks pretty good now. So now that we've got threading on both sides, we should be able to install this thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so the HDMI port is now installed, and what I found to be effective was to get this side over here screwed into place, and then I actually unscrewed the HDMI connector and removed it, just kind of so that it was out of the way, and then I tacked in the second screw, because I really couldn't access this screw with all this stuff in the way. So I really had to lock this in, remove this, and then put this back in, because there's like a captive nut down there. So I had to get all of that situated. But yeah, now it's all set. And on the flip side here, you can see here's the 2 screws that hold everything down. So now for this next step, you might need to do modifications to the shell of your console. So this is an American version which has an RF modulator. So I thankfully had to do almost nothing. I just had to cut off this little standoff that was here. This was not for a screw. It was just like, I guess, support for the motherboard underneath the RF modulator. So I just had to snip this one piece off. And with that off, everything fits perfectly. Now, if you have a console that is, say, from Japan, that does not have the RF modulator, you actually have to drill this hole out. Thankfully, on the inside of the shell, you can see the location of where that hole is supposed to be. So if you use something like a step drill, you can carefully make that hole available for the HDMI. But aside from that, though, that's really all that you've got to do. And now the HDMI port is all good to go. All right, so next thing we're going to be doing is soldering on this little board right over here. So this PCB converts 5 volts off of the 3DO and converts it into 3.3 volts, which is what powers the gem. So it's a pretty simple design. So you've got these 3 pads over here. So the center pad here is 5 volts, and then these 2 neighboring pads over here are ground. And so what you want to do is solder this to a capacitor like this one right here, where the positive leg is attached to 5 volts and the negative leg is attached to ground. So this is the one that Dan and the PixelFX guys suggest in the guide. So what I'm going to do now is just add some solder to this jumper here, and then also add it to this leg. So those two are going to be bridged together. There we go. So that's our 5 volts. And now we're going to bridge these two pads over here. And that's going to be our ground. Okay. Let me just double check all that. And yeah, that looks good to me. And so now what we're going to go ahead and do is just bring this in. It's kind of designed just so that you can solder in these legs and then just connect it to the capacitor itself. So yeah, that was pretty easy. I'm just gonna go over my work and double check with the multimeter and make sure there's no bridges or shorts or anything like that, but we should be good to go. All right, so now we're gonna get started with the fun part, which is soldering on the main flex cable. So you can see here what I'm doing is just trying to line it up because it's pretty fine pitch, and you really should use a microscope for this because it's pretty tough. The other thing too is that while you're lining up one side, you should also make sure that the other side, which is kind of out of view, is also getting lined up. So that's what I'm doing right here. And then once it's all done, you can see that I've already pre-tinned all of the pads before I even brought it over here. So this means I have enough solder and I don't have to worry about adding solder to it. And then after adding some flux, I go to an area near the middle of the flex and I just try to tack down a few of the pads just so that I can make sure that I have a decent connection. So yeah, that's kind of just the start of things, but once it's kind of tacked down, you gotta take a look and just make sure that nothing is shifted on the extreme ends, because if you have an error on one of the extreme ends, it just gets worse and worse, and eventually you'll get misaligned. So thankfully in this case, I don't. And so I'm just continuing to tack down every single pad and work my way down. So in order to do this, I kind of had to do it without the scope because I'm with this microscope here that I'm filming. It's okay, but it's not perfect for using while you actually work. But yeah, that gives you hopefully the idea is that you just want to like kind of tack things down and then go pin by pin with the chisel tip like you see me doing here and making sure that all of them are attached. Once everything is attached, you also need to go back with a multimeter and check for any kind of shorts. You can go looking from pin to pin, adjacent pins, and making sure there's no shorts there. Yeah, that's essentially the process. So we're just going to go ahead and continue working our way through. Okay, so here we are on the other side, and so you can see what I mean about alignment. You've got to make sure that these pads go to the correct pins on the chip. So that first pad is actually, I'm sorry, that first pin is unoccupied, and then the flex cable starts connecting up. So you've got a bank of 5 pads over there that need to get soldered into place, and then there's another set of 4 pads at the very end that also need to be soldered into place. And I'm just using my tweezers just to make sure everything stays down and stays aligned. But otherwise, that's about it. I mean, it's actually not that difficult, just as long as you did a good job on the other side and made sure that everything is aligned properly. Okay, so the worst is done, and I went off camera and just double checked my work, and I didn't find any bridges or any kind of issues with the flex cable installation. So I just used my multimeter and, you know, checked adjacent pins, and yeah, everything is good to go. So there's not too much left to do. The next thing we're going to do is just kind of get the RetroGem ready for being mounted onto the board. So first thing you got to do is set up all the jumpers, and so the easiest thing to do is just keep F open and H open, and then close all of the others. So that's the settings that you need for 3DO. Now, there's this mounting board that comes with it, and so for the FZ ones, for most of them, What you need is this spacer bar here and the mounting block itself. And so all we're gonna do is just thread these screws through. So I'm just running them through the spacer here. And now we're gonna just get these in to the final piece here. All right, last thing we gotta do is just install this extension right over here. And the flex cable goes in, so I'm just gonna go ahead and install that while it's easy and just put it in with the blue part facing up towards me, like this. Okay, and this 3M tape is gonna be used to attach it to the board. So let's go back to the board and find exactly where it's gonna go. All right, so the RetroGem is gonna end up sitting right about here. So basically the 3D printed mount kind of goes over where this arm chip is, and then the 3M tape is gonna kind of stick down right about like here or so. So what we gotta do now is just go ahead and get it attached to the flex, which is right over here. So I'm just gonna put it in like this, so the dark side is facing up towards you. And then we're gonna, let me just come back over here. So we're just gonna kind of come in like this and bring it in like that. And that should work just fine for mounting it. So now I just gotta go ahead and finish up the removal of the 3M tape and attach it here to the arm chip. All right, so now that the gem board is mounted like this, we're gonna go ahead and finish the connections for 3.3 volts. So we're just gonna solder to this little pad right over here and bring in this little flex piece. Okay, just want to get that attached and kind of out of the way. Don't want it to bunch up to anything. And then the final thing I got to do over here, well, not the final, but getting close to the end here, we're going to go ahead and attach the HDMI extender from the gem all the way to the end over here. And just clip it in. And there's our video going to the very back of the console. So there's only one thing left to do now, and it's to solder in 2 wires to finish connecting to the controller port. All right, so the last thing we need to do is install 2 wires that go from the clock and data lines on the controller pad to the gem itself. This is just so that when you hit the button combo, you can pull up the menu and make changes or what have you. So we're just gonna solder in 2 wires. This one over here on top of this resistor, which is 543. This is gonna be for the data line. So I'm just gonna solder that one in. And then if we come over here, you can see I already pre-tinned the pad for data. Let me just shorten that a bit. All right, so our second wire, which is clock, is going to be going right over here to this pad that's unpopulated. Okay, so with that, we are all done, and we can go ahead and put this thing together and give it a test. Okay, so the wires for the controller are set, and I realized after the fact that I actually swapped things around. So clock over here is actually the wire that goes to this side of resistor 543, and data is actually going to this empty pad over here. So just so if you guys are following along, you just make things correct. I mean, if you do it wrong, it's not the end of the world, because the menu won't work, but it won't hurt anything. You just have to go back in and flip it around. I also went ahead and installed the socket here so that you know, in the future, if this 2032 battery dies, which of course it will, then you can just easily swap it out. You don't need to solder anything. Okay, so this thing is done. Let me go ahead and reassemble the console, and then let's give it a test. Okay, so we are ready to go, and let me just show you guys the back of the console real quick so you can see how nicely the 3D print turned out. So yeah, you can see it just fits perfectly where the RF used to be. It looks like it's always been there and always meant to be there. So let me just turn on the console. Oop, damn it. All right, well, there we go. Oh, okay, sorry for that. Just turn this thing on. And yeah, we're in business. We've got video. Let me go to the Street Fighter 2, since that looks really good. All right, perfect. So it's just going to take a second to load with that optical disc emulator. And let's see what it looks like and what it sounds like. But yeah, so far, I mean, I'm getting all the colors. I'm pretty sure this was a successful installation. Ah, there we go. Looks incredible. So let me show you how to do the main menu. So what you gotta do is you hold both triggers, the B button and right. Now I have this 6-button pad for Street Fighter, so this is not really ideal, but let me just hold that down. Oh, maybe not. Ugh, come on. Ah, there we go. Sorry, it was just really hard to do that with this controller. Normally with the stock controller, you don't have that kind of problem. All right, so here's the Retro Gem menu, and this works very much like it does for other versions of the Retro Gem. So you have, you know, scan lines and slot masks to make it look like a CRT. If I go, oop, I should have, oh no, not again. So sorry. Okay, here we go. So if I go into video, I can change the, well, output resolution, sorry, over here. So I can go up to 1440p. So that looks really awesome. It has direct mode. So this is nice for the 4K scalers like the Morph or the RetroTank 4K. And then if I go here into system, and if I go and check out the self-test, all right, so everything is showing up as a heart except for vertical sync right over here. And that's actually supposed to be that way. So I think depending on the version of 3DO, this will either show up as stuck high or you'll get a heart. So having it stuck high like this doesn't actually mean that there's a fault. So really what you want to see is you want to see hearts on all the RGB lines with the clock and with all the other stuff on the diagnostic menu there. So we are in business. So yeah, there's actually quite a lot of features on the Retro Gem, and it's kind of something that is really beyond the scope of this video. What I really wanted to do here was just show you guys how to do the installation. But as you can probably see, it looks absolutely incredible. It's razor sharp, so it's not like that interlaced video of 480i that the 3DO normally puts out. And the analog inputs also still work, so if you ever wanted to connect it up to a CRT or do dual display with a CRT and a flat screen, you could do that as well. So yeah, this mod is really awesome. I definitely recommend it for the 3DO. It makes it look phenomenal. And yeah, it's really nice that, you know, PixelFX are paying attention to consoles like this that are a little bit more obscure and giving them the love and treatment that they deserve. All right, guys, well, that's it for this week's video. If you like this kind of content, then consider subscribing to the channel. I'm going to be doing these installations, and of course, if you need anything repaired or modified or installed, you can reach me directly at oneuprestorations.com. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.